they forgot the gasket actually needed to go on before the float. So I just take the float back off, put the gasket on there. Now we'll assemble the halves. Okay, I got the carburetor installed. As I previously mentioned, I'm going to be running this on a nurse tank because that fuel tank is underneath and it's automotive style and it's flipping huge. I'm sure it's full of crap. So I'm just going to put a nurse tank on the other side and it'll gravity feed. Also, I'm having some issues sorting out a fuel pump. The original fuel pump is different than whatever the replacement is that they had, and I don't have one for it. So I might just build a plate and put one of my electric pumps on it. I don't know yet. For now, it's just going to be gravity fed. This choke cable was really stiff, but these types of choke cable, I don't know if you guys can see it. Let's zoom in a little bit here. You can see it there. It's a that type of choke cable is actually it doesn't have a solid sheath on it. It's a spiral round wire. So if you run into one of those, there's no point in trying to use if you got a cable luber, trying to push it up there because it's not going to make it. It's just going to puke out. So basically what I do is take a rag and put it on the other side and just hit it with penetrating oil and go all the way up it. And then it loosens up and works just fine. So we've got it all loosened up. That's full stroke there, so we're just about ready for a test start. I do not have a ballast resistor for it to prevent burning up the coil, so it's not going to be able to be run for very long, but I want to get it started and make sure that it's actually going to build air and actually get it to run for a little bit and check out the compressor, because I know it starts to build air, but I want to see it actually build up full air pressure and see if the governor assembly throttles it down. I'm not too familiar with this type of this governor assembly. I got to look at it a little closer. I know that there's a valve in the intake of the compressor. It kind of looks like it in order to shut down in order to unload the compressor. I think it, from what I can tell so far, it actually just closes that valve and takes away its intake, which that kind of sucks. I don't like the way that's designed. But aside from having a clutch of some sort on it, really I don't see any other way to do it. So, I really thought there would be something a little better, you know, to where it would, I don't know. I wonder if you could make it to where it would just cycle air back to the intake, or, you know, dissipate it somehow through a big muffler or something, so that it's not, because I don't like the idea of it just pulling a huge vacuum on it, but, you know, that's how it's designed, so at least from what I can tell, that's one of the things I got to check once I get it running. Okay, so I was having some problems with the starter, as I mentioned earlier, and I finally got all that fixed, but this is basically a long bolt that goes through and threads into the inside of this stud here. Let's get you zoomed in where you can see it a little better. And so it had stripped out because it doesn't thread in very far, and I couldn't find a good enough bolt in my, it's actually a machine screw, in my stash. So what I did was I got it in there, and see, it was barely making any contact, and it was getting super hot when I'd crank, so I knew it wasn't going to last very long. So what I did was I got it to where it would just catch, and then I took my little pencil torch, my little soldering torch, and I heated this up, and I soldered it both there and there. So if I ever need to get it apart, I just hit it with the torch and give it a smack, and all the solder will fling off of there, and I can pull it apart. That's why I didn't want to braze it, just because you can't get brazing off easily. But the solder will handle that, and as long as you got a good connection there, it won't get too hot that it'll melt the solder off unless you're cranking it excessively long, which it's a gas engine, so if I'm cranking it that long, I've got something wrong and I need to stop. But the key to doing this is you need to clean it, so hit it with a wire brush, and you need flux. You're not going to be able to get this without flux. Okay, we had a slight interruption there. So this is a 40% tin, or 40% tin, 60% lead. So you don't want to be sticking your fingers in your mouth while you're using it. It's kind of hard to find thinner sizes. A lot of times you got to go on Amazon or something like that. But this size here you can get. You can get at big box stores, but it's got to be a rosin core. Acid core is for plumbing. It's no good. Don't use that for electrical. Alright, so I think the way this was originally designed, let's get you some light here, was I went ahead and just heat shrink this one because it's dead, and I'm not really sure where the power's going, and I'm not going to cut open wire looms right now to sort it out. So what I did was I just took a wire and ran off of this wire's coming off the ignition switch, off the key switch on key on, so it's hot with key on. And then it's going through my ballast resistor so I don't burn up my coil. You can run these coils, if it says external resistor required, you can run them on straight 12 volt, but not for long. You'll notice, like, you know, if you're doing it for testing purposes or whatever, as cars and cameras would say, for testing purposes only, you'll notice that the body will get hot, and it will get hot enough that you can't hang on to it. So you need that ballast resistor to run it long term. And that's just a like a $7 auto parts store one. I think I tossed the box here. Let me see if I can dig it for you. So this one is a BWD RU12, and that just knocks the voltage down to about 8, so it's not overheating the coil. You'd think with all of our technology, they would have figured out that all coils should be able to handle a straight 13 volts, but they don't. You still gotta have a ballast resistor. But I got all that wired up. So I think the way this was originally designed, or the way this was originally set up, was, you know, it had some safety shutdowns, which really don't matter to me because I pay attention to it, and I'm not going to be really walking away from it while it's running. I'm like sandblasting with it and things of that nature, so I'll be next to it. But it was designed, it's set up so there's a temp switch right there. That's a switch. Right down below it is the sensor, but up there is a switch, and that's a high limit switch. And over there is a high, I believe it's a high pressure switch, and I think this one is a compressor high temp switch. So when it exceeds the range on all of those, and this is a low oil pressure switch, it's normally open, so when the engine's running, you got oil pressure. No, correction, no, that's right, it's normally open. So when you got oil pressure, it's closed and sending power, or, well, it's making a connection. And I think the way it was designed was this is actually a ground, I think, and I think it was set up to if any of those conditions were not met, meaning running below high temp sensor switch setting on engine coolant and compressor temp, and not exceeding the high pressure limit, then it will make connection and allow the coil ground to allow it to run. So you would have to press and hold a bypass button to get it to start, and then once the oil pressure built up, you could let it go. And then if any of those conditions were not met, it would shut it down so that you didn't have to have an operator standing beside it. That's really not that big of a deal to me as of right now. Maybe someday I'll get all that sorted out, but right now I need it to run so I can test a bunch of jackhammers and things of that. Let's see, what do I have? Jackhammers and some couple of rock drills and stuff that I need to test so I can get them up for sale. And so I just need the air compressor running for now. And then after the shop's done and I get caught up on some of the other ugly stuff, then I can actually spend a little bit of time and sort out this wiring and get it to function as it normally would. And then I'm still missing an air filter for the carburetor. Originally this had a pipe that ran up into here, and it used the main air filter to filter intake air for the carburetor as well as the compressor. I didn't really like that design because it was when you shut the engine off, oil vapor from the compressor will barf back up into here, and I didn't really want the carburetor sucking that up when I'd restart, because it's just going to make it gum up that much faster. So I ordered a cone filter, just a cheap cone filter for it, and I think it came as a 2-pack, and I'll just run it on that. I'm missing that pipe, so I would have had to bend one anyway, and I'm not going to do that, especially not right now. Like I said, I don't really like the idea of all that oil vapor coming up and getting sucked into the carburetor. It wouldn't hurt the engine, but it kind of gums up the carburetor and just make me have to clean it that much sooner. I suspect that's probably what happened to this thing originally, was that carburetor got gummed up, and it's probably part of a fleet and they just didn't want to mess with it, so they just let it set for years and couldn't get it started, and that's how I ended up with it cheap. I'll get you guys all set up here, and we're gonna cold start it. And but I'm gonna get that air filter assembly put back on first, and then we'll get it started and let it run for a bit and mess around with it for a bit, and then I need to get it out of here. There's one more thing I wanted to cover here. Inside here is there's a spring-loaded check valve in here, and it just has a big disc that sits on a brass seat inside here, and then there's a cartridge with a spring in it and an O-ring to seal. Sits right in on top of this. Spring pushes this down. When the pressure gets below 60 psi, that valve will slam shut and won't let any air out. Well, that's not super convenient for me. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of that really was, but I might trim that spring down and get it down to about 30 psi, but right now it's running without it, so I have straight pressure, and that's fine. That'll work just fine for me, so with my particular uses. This right here this is the air governor. It just basically throttles it up and down based on pressure within the tank. So once it hits set pressure, it throttles it down. It's very simple. I think this one's leaking just a little bit, but we'll get to that eventually. Puking a little oil out of it. Have to find a diaphragm for it, which is going to suck, but this bolt right here is your maximum operating pressure setting. Crank it in, increase your pressure. Crank it out, decrease your pressure. This thing was originally set for 100 psi, that's what I have it now. I cranked it up to 120 just to make sure it would do it, and it will. So this bolt right here on your air governor, you can see engine, it's hanging on the bell housing. That's your air governor. This is your pressure adjustment. So if you guys, any of you guys are trying to figure one of these things out, that's what your that's where your pressure adjustment is. I just followed lines around and through process of elimination figured it out, but I haven't been able to find any information on Joy or compressors online really to speak of, so I'm kind of just figuring it out as I go. But I happen to be good at that because I get a lot of really old oddball stuff. So let's go onward and upward. Alright, we're going to give it a cold start. I got that pry bar stuck in the air governor so the thing doesn't go Mach 1 because I don't like it to rev up so high when it's cold. So let's give her a try and see what we get. I think the carburetor's out of fuel. Let me get that sorted out. Alright, there you go. Got an air leak I gotta fix, so I'll get that sorted out. And at some point maybe I'll shoot a video of it running an air tool or something, but obviously it builds air, so thanks for watching.